Coming to our topic for today, we are hearing the word Agile in most of the places. Now, when we hear the word Agile, one thing that comes to our mind is nimbleness, because if we go to the dictionary and we check what is the meaning of the word Agile, then it will tell you that it is being nimble or being able to run fast, etc. But in the world of business, when we say Agile, what we mean is it reflects about how quickly we can respond to change. When there is a change that needs to happen, then we need to respond to it and make sure that we address the situation, right? So in the context of a business environment, when we say we are agile, it doesn't mean that we are participating in a daily stand-up meeting or that we have a product backlog or some other backlog, but what it actually means is how quickly we can respond to change and bring about an increase in revenue. That is what business agility actually means. So let's explore a little bit of this world of Agile. Now, coming to the history of Agile. Agile was originally developed by the Department of Defense and NASA. Most people do not associate Agile with these two agencies, but that is where it all started. And of course, NASA is always very good in coming up with process-related definitions. If you remember from the Waterfall methodologies, they were also the ones who came up with all the estimation techniques. And true to their tradition in the world of Agile too, they are the ones who actually brought up this concept of iterative development. Now, when we say Agile, of course, NASA and DoD, they had started this process, but later on, some other industries actually made it very popular. And one of the companies that come to our mind is the Toyota company, the automobile manufacturing company, because what they had done is they had come up with this process of lean manufacturing. So that was also studied by other companies, and they also contributed to the development of Agile. Now, coming to the difference between Waterfall and Agile, the main difference is this. In Waterfall, it is more of a traditional management. Now, when we say traditional management, what do we mean? So, first of all, there is, when a project comes up, we have to go back to the history and find out how the project actually came into being. It is because there was a market need for it. They had, the organization, it had done some, done some research, and through competitive intelligence and all that, they realized that there is actually a market need for a particular product, and then it goes through the round of approvals. And once the project gets approved, then they get started with the requirements phase. In the meantime, the project, you will have a project kickoff meeting, etc. Then we start with the business requirements gathering phase, where all the requirements are gathered. And once the requirements are gathered, we have something called as the business requirements document, which will then be signed off by all the senior stakeholders and or key stakeholders, as they may be called. Then we will start with the design phase of the project, and once the design phase is over, then we'll start with the development phase, and after the development phase is over, we'll get started with the testing phase, and once the testing phase is almost done, we'll get started with the user acceptance testing process, and once that is signed off, we then go into the deployment phase, and then followed by post-production testing, etc. So if you see this whole process, the whole area of waterfall project management involves sequential arrangement of these steps. So one process follows the other, whereas in the world of Agile, this is how it actually happens. In the world of Agile, you have the analysis phase. First of all, we get started with the analysis phase. The analysis phase, when we get started and we do a little bit of analysis, we get started with the design phase. Now, when design is in progress, we also do a little bit of coding. And while we are doing coding, we also test what we are coding. And if the testing shows that whatever we had worked on was okay, we then move into the deployment phase. So here, in the world of Agile, you can see that all these different steps, that is analysis, design, code, test, and deploy, they are all happening around the same time. Whereas in the world of Waterfall, all these different steps, they would have been done sequentially. They will happen one after the other. But in the Agile world, they are all happening at the same time. Now, coming to this question, what is this incremental delivery? It is because we are taking a little piece of the work, we are analyzing what needs to be done, then we are designing what needs to be done. When we come up with a design that the team is comfortable with, we then go into the coding phase, and once the code has been tested, we deploy the little piece of work that we did. Now, once everyone is happy with the deployment, then we start with the next piece of the work. So this process is what is called as incremental delivery. Now, most people may equate Agile with Scrum because that is the most popular Agile methodology, but in fact, there are several types of Agile methodologies. Of course, the most popular being Scrum, so that is why it is listed at the top. The other Agile methodologies would include Dynamic Systems Development Method, which is also known as DSDM, that's the abbreviation. The next would be Extreme Programming, which has been abbreviated to XP. The other alternatives are Crystal Clear, Lean, Kanban, etc. Now, coming to Scrum, that is the most popular. Extreme Programming is what is used for most of the engineering tasks. Crystal Clear is also pretty much close to Scrum. Now, coming to Lean, Lean is what is used in most of the manufacturing environments. When we say Toyota, Honda, and all that, they are all following more of a Lean methodology. And later on in the process, I will tell a little bit about Lean. The last one, Kanban, that is a sort of Agile methodology where the representation is actually very, very visual. And along with these things, we also have Kaizen, which is the Japanese word for continuous improvement. So these are some of the Agile methodologies that we do have. Now, coming to the introduction of Agile as we do now, it was actually started in the year 2001 when some lightweight methodologists came together in Utah. There were about 17 of them who came around, and they were discussing the Agile way of delivering software. And the result of that meeting was two things. One was the Agile manifesto, and the second was the Agile principles. So that meeting in 2001 produced these two things, the Agile manifesto and the Agile principles. Now let us see what is this Agile manifesto. Now I have taken the statement as it comes from the manifesto. Now this manifesto is the guiding principle on which most of the Agile methodologies work. Now they have 4 principles. What I've done is I'm presenting it here in bold so you can read it quickly. The first one says individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Now what do we mean by that? It is because in the world of traditional project management, we would pay more importance to the to certain individuals, right? We would pay more importance to certain processes, like we will go through a definite order, like what I was stating earlier on. We will get started with the design phase, we will get it signed off, and then we will move into the development phase. And there somebody will, there will be some checkpoint, and that also needs to be signed off. And then we go to the QA phase. There also it needs to be signed off, and the UAT, etc. Right? So there in the traditional waterfall methodology, more attention is paid to all these processes and tools. Whereas in the world of Agile, what we say is we have to pay more attention to the individuals who are actually carrying out these processes. So more importance is given to the people and the face-to-face interactions that these people need in order to enable those processes to happen. So that would be the first statement as it comes out in the Agile manifesto. Now the second statement that we have is working software over comprehensive documentation. Now what do we mean by this comprehensive documentation? It is because in traditional management techniques, you would have seen a huge design document being produced. Now it takes a lot of time to produce the design document. At the end of the day, by the time we get started with the actual work, all those little pieces that are present in the design document may no longer be necessary. So we have taken a lot of time to actually create the document which nobody may be reading. So that is why here the Agile manifesto says we need to place more value on working software. What do we mean by that? What we say is we need to produce a little bit of documentation and get started with the work, do it in little pieces, take it one step at a time, show it to the customer, make sure that it is actually working before you proceed to improvising it. Okay, so that is the meaning of this second statement in the Agile manifesto. So they give more value to working software rather than producing large amounts of documentation. Now there is actually a proof for this one. We would have actually seen it in our everyday lives. If you had purchased any furniture or even any electronic equipment a few years ago, maybe over 10 years ago, you would have seen a huge booklet that was actually coming along with the package. If you had a TV or maybe a furniture to be assembled, you would have seen a thick booklet about 10 years ago. But these days, we don't see a huge booklet like that. Instead, it will only be a few pages. It will just have some pictures and just tell you very quickly what you should do in order to get it working. Now that is an example of Agile. So they have, all these manufacturers, they have implemented these Agile techniques, and they have actually cut down on the documentation, and they've just brought it down to just what you need to get started. Okay. Now, moving to the third statement in the Agile manifesto, it states that we need to place more importance to customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This is because in the traditional methods, what we do is we'll have an SOW, and the team gets started on the development of the things that are mentioned in the SOW. So we just take a look at the requirements document, and we start working on the requirements that are present in that SOW, or whatever contract we might have. But here, the Agile methodologies states that what we need to do is, instead of trying to to hold everybody accountable for a contract, instead you have to work side by side with the customer. So the vendor and the customer will actually be working in close collaboration with each other. So the vendor will actually produce a little piece of the work, show it to the customer, make sure that the customer is satisfied, and then proceed to the next part of the work. There is a reason why the Agile manifesto has this particular statement. It is because at that early stage in a project, the traditional project management technique thinks that the person who is actually giving the requirements has a complete idea about what they actually need. But practically, in real life, that may not be the case. The person who is actually giving the requirements need not completely have a picture about what is required. So many times in life, we will see that when we produce something, especially if you're working in web development or in some other creative field like that, as soon as you produce a web page, the business team, which actually gave the requirement for it, they would actually get some new ideas as soon as they see the page, and they will make some suggestions in order to improve it. Now, if we go back to the traditional project management technique, in a situation like this, when the business comes and tells you that some improvement is actually needed, or if a customer comes to you and tells that an improvement is needed, in those situations, the traditional project management method will ask you to go through a change request process, or it is a CR as it is called then. So we have to go through the change request process, then we have to make sure that it is approved, and only then work on the improvising process. But here in the world of Agile, we collaborate with the customer, and changes are always welcome. The customer's satisfaction is more important at the end of the day, and the customer needs to see value in the product that we are actually delivering. Now, the last statement reads, responding to change over following a plan. Now, what do we mean by that? Again, going to the traditional technique, now traditional project management techniques, as we stated earlier, we follow a plan to the dot. Like there, in the while you're giving the PMP exam, you must have seen that we make a detailed plan right at the beginning. As soon as we get the requirements for a project, we start listing down what are all the tasks that need to be done. That is all called as the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is, we start at the high level items, and then we break it down into, little activities, and at the bottom of the work breakdown structure, we have the work package, which is further broken down into activities, and the time and the effort that is required to finish all these activities is then rolled up to the top, and that is how you would come with the plan. Now, if there is any change in the plan, then we need to go to the change request process, and then we need to start working on the changes. Whereas here, in the case of Agile, changes are always welcome. They are even welcome even during the last phases. It is because they realize that change is something that is constant in this world. If there is anything that is constant, it is change, right? So That is why they always welcome change, and here they always place more importance on satisfying the customer and delivering them value in the work that we are actually doing. Now, most people will just read the 4 statements that are mentioned in the Agile manifesto. Now, if you see at the bottom, there is a small statement that reads, "This implies while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more." Now, if you're going to give your PMI-ACP exam, this last statement, which is very often referred to as the 5th statement, will be there in most of the situations that you will be seeing there. It is because most people assume that when they read the manifesto, they assume that individuals and interactions are the one that is required. Processes and tools are not required. Now, that is not the case. That is why you have this 5th statement in the Agile manifesto. It is telling that the Agile methodologists who came up with this manifesto do not say that processes and tools are not required. That is not what they're saying. What they're saying is, we just give more importance to individuals and interactions rather than processes or tools. The word "over" is very important there because they're not saying no to processes and tools. In the same way, when we practically do work, sometimes developers will not be willing to give detailed documentation. Now, once again here, they do not mean no documentation. What they mean is, we need to produce working software so people can actually work and test the software and then proceed. If they're satisfied, we can proceed. Same way, the 3rd statement, of course, we need to have some contracts in place. There needs to be some accountability, but emphasis is given more on collaborating with the customer rather than holding somebody accountable. In the same way, the last statement, we need to have a plan, but we also need to respond to change as and when it actually happens. So this is the Agile manifesto. I hope it has been clear to you. In case you have any doubts, please feel free to reach out to me. So right now I don't see any questions, so I'm assuming that everyone is okay with whatever we discussed until now. So moving on to the next slide. Along with the manifesto, we also have some 12 principles. Now, these principles actually extend upon what is mentioned in the manifesto. Now, the first principle states that the highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Now, what do we mean by this? It is because we think that producing valuable software is more important than following a detailed plan or holding someone accountable to something they have said earlier on. So that is the reason why we have this very first principle. Now, the second principle reads that we welcome changing requirements even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Now, why do we have this principle? It is because of this. Now, the world these days is moving at a very fast pace. So the time to market is actually very less. By the time we come up with an idea and start working on it, most often we realize that somebody has actually beaten us to the game. So that is why we have the second principle here, which says that we welcome changing requirements. That is because when we see that the competitor has actually been able to produce something earlier than us, then we need to respond to that situation and bring about changes accordingly. Or what if there are some regulatory requirements? If some regulatory body states that we need to make some changes, then absolutely we need to make it, even if it is in the last stage of development. Now, the third principle states that deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. Now, what do we mean by this? It's because in the traditional project, we go through the phases sequentially. So by the time we come to the end of the project, most of the people would have even forgotten where we started or what was actually required at the beginning. Whereas here, what happens is we are delivering it in small pieces. We do a little piece of the work, we deliver it, make sure that the customer is satisfied, and in case they want us to make some improvements, we work on those, and then we proceed. So that would be the third principle. Now, coming to the fourth principle, it states that business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Again, in the traditional projects, the business teams would most likely not come in contact with the developers. It will be the business analyst and the project manager who will be going in between these two teams. But here, in the world of Agile, they encourage the business people and developers to work in collaboration with each other, so the developers can actually hear from the business what they want and work accordingly. Come to the next principle. It says that we have to build projects around motivated individuals, and we have to give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. So this statement is very important because this statement is what is giving the team the power. So in the world of Agile, we have empowered teams, or they are self-organizing teams. In the traditional methodologies, the project manager would be giving the directions and the team would be following whatever the project manager is saying. But here, that is not the case in the world of Agile. In the world of Agile, the team is supposed to know what they have to do, and the project manager or the Scrum Master's role here tends to be more of a facilitating role, or the person is just making sure that the team is able to do the work without any disturbances or impediments as they are all coming in their way. The next statement reads, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Here in the world of Agile, they believe in co-located teams. They want people to be able to communicate with each other, so if there are any doubts, they can be clarified and everybody knows what we are working on. But of course, in these days, having a co-located team may not be completely feasible. So in those cases, we would have to make use of virtual methods like WebEx meetings or the meeting that we have right now, etc. The next principle states that working software is the primary measure of progress. Now there is a reason why we have this particular statement. If we go to our traditional methods, there we would say that the project would actually, be called 70% complete, 80% complete, 75% complete, and all that. So until it is coming to the late stage, if you ask, people will say that they are on track. The project is being done according to expectations. It's going to meet expectations. And most of the problems will actually crop up in the last phase of the project. Whereas here, in the world of Agile, they give more importance to working software. What do we mean by that? We are doing the work, we are writing the code, we are showing the early code that we have written to the customer to ensure that this is what they want. So That is how progress is measured in the Agile world. In the next statement in the Agile principles, it states that Agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So what do we mean by that? It's because since the traditional methods were developed, since they concentrate more on planning, then what happens is we think that there is a false sense of progress. Like I said earlier in the earlier principle, that until it is 75% to 80% complete, we think that it is on track. And towards the end, we realize that there is a problem and everybody starts rushing in. Everybody has to work overnight and make sure that it goes into release. Now, in the world of Agile, the release cycles come very frequently. So because of that, every day is a constant pace. So we have to be able to sustain that pace. If not, there will be too much work towards the end of the project when everybody has to put in the effort to actually enable a successful project to close. Now, continuing with the principles, the next one states that continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. That's because here we are in a constant improvement mode. Here the team as well as the customer, they are in constant collaboration with each other. We work on the code, we improvise it, we show it to the customer, get the feedback, work on it again, improvise it again, and get the next feedback. So we are constantly improving our own work. And while we are coding, we might also be refactoring the code. That is why we have this particular statement there saying technical excellence. The next statement reads simplicity. Now, what is simplicity? It is the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. Now, this is a very important concept. This is particularly true in the world of lean. Now, lean management states that you have to concentrate more on the work that needs to be done rather than take all the work that need not be done. I'll give a very simple example from everyday life. Like say, for example, we had to clean a room or clean the attic, as the case may be. How often we have come across an old picture or a photograph or something like that, and instead of concentrating on cleaning the room, we instead start going down memory lane. So there, the work itself got affected, right? So that is just to give a little, little story so you can relate to what I'm talking about. So here, simplicity means we are concentrating on the work that needs to be done. That is of utmost importance if the project has to be completed, rather than concentrating on all the other techniques, on all the other steps that may or may not lead to the customer being satisfied. The next principle reads, the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Now, this is because in the world of Agile, the teams are empowered. They can make their own decisions. They know what to do. They are in constant contact with the business or the customer, and they are constantly getting the feedback, and they are making changes accordingly. So here, there is a level of trust that is built into the team. That is why we say that when we trust people, we are expecting them to give their best too, and hence the statement here. Now, the next statement reads, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Most of you may have heard a little bit about the Scrum practices. I'm talking about Scrum since that is the more popular Agile methodology. Now, There you must have heard about the word retrospective. Now that is similar to what we have as lessons learned in the traditional project management world. So in the world of traditional project management, after we are done with a project, we will have something that is called as lessons learned. So what do we do in this lessons learned? We actually sit down and the whole team, that is all the people who had anything to do with the project, come together, the project sponsor, all the key stakeholders, and the developers, every investor, everybody comes and they tell what are all the things that we did well and what are all the things that we did not do well. Plus, there are also suggestions for improvement in case we do the same project the next time, or if there is a similar project that is coming in. Now, whatever we gain from this lessons learned will go into the knowledge base in the traditional project management world. Now, the Agile world has something similar, except that instead of having the lessons learned at the very end, right? See, what is the point in having the lessons learned towards the end of the project when we have actually completed it, right? So it would be more beneficial to actually think about these things while we are in the midst of the project. So here in the world of Agile, we will have a sort of lessons learned at the end of every iteration. Okay. Now, what do we mean by iteration? Now, iteration is we are taking a little piece of the work, we are completing it, right? And then we are moving on to the next piece of work that needs to be done. So after we are done with one part of the work, we sit down and reflect upon what we did right, what we did not do right, and how we can improve ourselves. So that is a sort of lessons learned. But it is being done frequently here. That's the difference. And in the world of Agile, it's not called as lessons learned. It's rather called as retrospective because we are reflecting upon what we actually did. Now, there are also some other features of Agile, like we are placing value over constraints. Now, in the world of traditional management, you would have heard about triple constraints, time, scope, etc. Now, here in Agile, we want to give value to the customer. So, giving the customer working software takes precedence over thinking about time, scope, etc. In the world of traditional project management, it is the scope which dictates the process, whereas here we are in constant collaboration with the customer. The second feature of Agile is here we are more in a leading mode. In the traditional project management world, the manager tends to give directions to the team, whereas here in the world of Agile, the project manager tends to be more of a facilitator, and the Scrum Master or the coach in the world of XP actually helps in leading the team. So here, what do we mean by leading? It's because the project manager is facilitating the team, so the Scrum Master or the coach, as the case may be, is actually empowering the team to make their own decisions. So that is why the person is seen as a leader. Then the last feature is adapting over conforming. Now, what do we mean by this statement? It is because of this. In the Waterfall methodologies, you would have heard about 5 phases. The first phase is called as the initiation phase. Then we have the planning phase. Then we have the execution phase. And then we have the monitoring and control phase, followed by the closing phase, right? But in the world of Agile, it's a little bit different. Now, in the world of Agile, we have a sort of, these 5 different phases, but here they are known by different terms. They are called as envision. Envision phase means there we are actually envisioning what needs to be done in the actual project. Then we are going to the speculate phase. Now in the speculate phase, we are actually seeing what are the different ways to get the job done. So that would be the second phase, or the speculate phase. Now why do we call it as speculate? It is because of this. They want to show, the Agile methodologists, they want to show that there is a little amount of uncertainty that is connected with this phase. That is why it is called as the speculate phase. Following the speculate phase, what we have is actually the exploring phase. Now, the exploring phase is similar to the development work that we have in traditional methodologies, or the executing phase. So here it is called as the exploring phase. We are doing the work, then we are showing it to the customer, then we are working on the feedback, we are improvising ourselves, and so that is the fourth phase. That is the adapting phase. So it's a cyclical process. We are exploring, and then we are getting the customer's feedback. We are adapting ourselves based on the customer's feedback, and then we are if everything is okay, we are proceeding towards the close of the project. So here we are placing more emphasis on adapting ourselves to change rather than following a plan. Now the world of Agile will also have several other topics, but of course here we are only touching upon the tip of the iceberg here. So these are some of the other terms that you would come across if you were to take the training for Agile. There is something called as estimation. In the world of traditional project management, estimation is a huge process, but in the world of Agile, it tends to take a different view. Here, we are estimating the project in a slightly different way. Now, before we go into that, first of all, we need to see, why are we estimating something or not? Now, when we say we are estimating something, we are actually trying to estimate the size, the effort, and the duration of the project. Now, in the traditional project management world, like I said earlier, you will have the WPS, then you'll come down to activity level, find out how much time is required to complete the activities, and then roll it up. Whereas in Agile, we believe that nobody will have that much amount of insight about what needs to be done at that very early stage. So it is impossible to give an accurate estimate. So instead, what we do here is we are actually trying to come up with high-level estimates here. So whatever is in the near future, we can give a better estimate rather than giving an estimate on something that is going to come later on in the future. So in the world of Agile, estimation is done in two ways. Either using the story points, or you can estimate it in terms of ideal days. Now, what is the difference between these two? Now, when we say story points, what we mean is we are treating that particular process as a story, and then we are breaking it down into little points. So those are story points. Now we are telling that it's like the task that we have in the traditional project management world, except that we are assigning a weight to these story points, and we are saying that it will take this much time to actually do this particular story point. The second method of estimation would be in terms of ideal days. So there, in ideal days, we are trying to tell how much time it will take for us to do this particular, work if we had no interruption. Now, why do we say that? It's because it is easier to calculate in terms of ideal days rather than using into context the elapsed time. Elapsed time is the one that you actually need to take to do a particular task. Like say you get started on some work, then somebody comes by your desk and they're telling you that no, we all of us have to go to a meeting. So you have to drop whatever you're doing, and then you have to go and do and you have to go and attend the meeting. So that is all called as elapsed time. See, nobody can predict these kind of things. So that is why in the world of Agile, they would rather estimate the time that's required based on ideal time that is required to complete the project. So that way, everybody's estimate will be similar. Then the next one is value-based prioritization. Now, what do we mean by value-based prioritization? It's because we need to prioritize what needs to be done. Okay, some people equate Agile as no planning. That's not true. Here also we do planning, but here it tends to be more of a rolling way of planning, because we are trying to plan in detail the things that are coming in the near future and the things that are coming distantly, which are going to come a month later on. They are just planned at a high level. So when we do the work, the current work or the current iteration work, we need to prioritize the work. Now, how do we prioritize the work? We may be having 200 tasks in our entire list of work to do. But out of all these 200 tasks, maybe it is only 20 of them which will actually produce some measurable value, which will actually lead to an increase in revenue. So that kind of task must be done earlier on. So that is what is called as value-based prioritization. Now, who's the person who will actually prioritize it in the Agile world? It will be the product owner. Anybody who is accountable for the project is the person who is also going to prioritize it. Then the next is planning, and of course here in this the planning, Agile planning, again we are following a rolling way planning. We have before we start with the project, the product owner or the person who is responsible for the project actually sits down with the team and says what are all the things that we need to do in the project, and then we sit down and we break down the work. So whatever list of requirements that we have from the product owner is what is called as the product backlog. Now, what we do is out of all the items that are there in the product backlog, we take a few items and we start doing that for the first iteration. Now, coming to the monitoring, monitoring is a process which is present in the traditional project management worldview. There is a similar process here also, but there is a little bit of difference between the traditional techniques and the Agile world. Now, in the world of the traditional project management, you would have come across many terms that had to do with variance. Now, if you remember, if you had listened to this whole conversation for this 1 hour, you would have seen that I never mentioned the word variance at all. There in the traditional techniques, you would have heard about schedule variance, cost variance, and all that. So there, what we are thinking is, in the traditional project management world, we tend to think that the plan that we had earlier on is actually perfect. So that plan was perfect, and in case anything goes away from that perfect plan, that is seen as an exception. So that is treated as a variance. Whereas in the world of Agile, we are welcoming change. So we expect that there will be some variance. So we know that whatever plan we have now may not be perfect, and that is why we have a retrospective at the end of each iteration so we can actually improve on our work. Now, next is communication. Now, communication, of course, is of utmost importance. So here, the Agile project manager or the Scrum Master or coach, as in the world of X-Team, will also need to use their soft skills in order to get the job done. And as always, there is also a governance process that is involved, like there needs to be some high-level view of the whole thing, and there needs to be some policies and procedures in place. So all those will be covered under governance. Now, there is one thing that I would like to point out as we come towards the end of the webinar. Now, you would have heard about all this, burn down charts, burn up charts, and all that. Now, this burn down chart, they're telling you how much work you were originally supposed to do and how much amount of the work was actually done. Okay, so these are visual indicators telling you how much progress has been made. So that is what we mean by burn down indicators or burn up indicators. That is, showing the indication in reverse. That is a common word that you will come across. Then there are a few other things, like you would have heard about the retrospective. Retrospective is similar to lessons learned. Then you have heard about iterations. Iteration means you are breaking down the tasks. You are breaking down the entire list of requirements into specific tasks, and out of all the tasks that we have, maybe we are having 100 tasks in the task list, and out of that we are taking 10 tasks and going to finish that one in the next 1 month. So that would be called as an iteration backlog. But the most important point that I want you to remember is this. See, all these things, well, whatever we have mentioned so far, it is rather a framework. When we actually do the task every day, like when you're saying that I'm taking part in a daily stand-up meeting. By the way, daily stand-up meeting is part of the Scrum ceremony. We have something called as Scrum ceremonies, which of course we will go into detail when we go for the training. We will tell what are the the Scrum ceremonies, the Scrum artifacts, etc. So there, whatever we are talking about here, right? All these points that we covered here, this would all come under the framework, whereas the task that you do every day is actually the engineering practice, and that is all coming from extreme programming. So that is something that I would like all of you to take away, that this is more of a methodology, like all we talk now here. Like these are all the guiding principles, right? So this is telling how we need to do it, what would be the better way of doing it. But the actual way in which we do it, when we say that we are actually doing it in iterations and all that, that is all part of extreme programming. So that is why all these different techniques are coming under the general umbrella of Agile methodology.